let's go through my games. Sorcerer, with these kicker-based novella models. Right? Basically, you're doing a novella or a fairly intensive, I guess today we would call it, a 6-episode season or something like that. You do those, and then you decide whether these characters have another one in them.
Right.
And the way that the change system for the characters works is to provide a great deal of opportunity to rebuild the character in such a fashion of saying, that's how they got here, and I have not seen them in this form do things yet. And now I can come up with a kicker which is just right for the way they are now. So Sorcerer did that. And how many times you do that is completely open, but the presumption is really, why, if you do that more than 2 or 3 times, then you're risking seasonal rot. So, it's up to you. Trollbabe, on the other hand, has very much an escalation mechanism. There is a maximum scale at which play can proceed. Since fates of continents and kingdoms are at work there, typically you're going to have an epic. You could play to epic closure. However, a great deal of playing Trollbabe is extremely satisfying at the episodic level, so typically people will play several episodes and they feel like they just had a really good time. And they actually kind of like the idea of thinking that their Trollbabe is out there adventuring, and maybe we don't want to see the end of her story. So we're done. Then you have, let's see, Elves is kind of its own thing. It's basically meant for scenario play of the D&D convention type. In fact, the right way to play Elves is literally to take a dungeon module from 1985 or earlier and elf it. Which, surprisingly enough, works a lot better with those than it does with the purported old school modules of today. Then you have It Was a Mutual Decision, which is a 1 evening, 1 play, big group game.
Right.
Spiona, which I am told has a design flaw, or rather in the sense that my choice was a bad one, which is that I wanted it to be played in 2 sessions. 2 separate sessions, and that is Spiona. Then you have...
why did people feel that was a flaw?
I don't know. Well, you can watch that same seminar I just talked about. It's called How Long, if you want. But I was roundly informed that, it was neither fish nor fowl, and therefore people wouldn't do it.
Interesting.
Then, I don't get it either. And then Shahida, which is 10 sessions, or you can start later in the sequence of 10. You can say, okay, we're starting at, it's done by periodic shifts in chronological time. So you say, all right, we're going to start in 1975, and another group says, no, we're going to start in 1982. But it will end in 1990. So you play, 2 to 10 sessions of Shahida. Let's see, should I keep going? Circle of Hands, which is built to have had enough intrinsic closure so that after a number of sessions, you feel as though your Rounds Table saga, has enough in it. Trying to achieve arriving at a good stopping point and knowing it without it being mechanically dictated. That's what that was for. And Champions Now, which is a really interesting question because I'm grappling with a lot of the things that you're talking about. And I think I've found some pretty good solutions for them. But it is also important to disincentivize or warn people off, or at least make clear that the traps exist, especially for the genre, that it's real easy to say, wasn't it awesome when, wasn't that big, it wasn't the Crisis of Infinite Earths amazing? And the answer is, really, was the Crisis of Infinite Earths amazing? It's, if yes, knock yourself out, but bear in mind that there are traps and that many of those maxi crossover series weren't amazing at all. And they weren't good because they were maxi crossover series. They were good for other reasons. So let's find out what those were. That most comics series, when the franchise has been established, limp along as supportive of other media. That's very true as well. Or you get the situation where, despite the deep verbal clamor for continuity, people are happiest if you just freaking ignore everything before and just do the hero a different way this time for a while. And you just don't, care that happened.
Right.
Again, comic book fans have a very troubled relationship with that. They say they don't like it, but they buy it in droves.
Right.
So, basically, Batman is haiku now. You take Batman and you do your own Batman haiku. And it goes on the wall next to everyone else's Batman haiku. And thinking of it as a through line is just ridiculous.
Right.
Marvel finally started doing that. And I have a troubled relationship with it because as I really appreciated the continuity that was brought to Marvel before it was official. The officialized continuity I thought was actually quite dreadful, but the unofficialized continuity of the 60s and 70s I liked quite a bit. But they embraced the DC model, which is the typical model for comics heroes and serial heroes in general, is to just, we're going to tell this story now. You have your exceptions. Prince Valiant, as written by and drawn by Hal Foster, was a single continuous story for decades and decades and decades as Prince Valiant aged from a teenager into his 50s. He really did it. He actually, every freaking, newspaper strip he drew, just drove the dude straight through that whole process. People do it, but it is rare. And it is far more common to have this kind of, this is my prose poem about Superman. This is my prose poem. And finally, they started doing it with characters like Spider-Man. When the idea of this being one guy's life finally fell apart and just wasn't sustainable anymore.
Yeah.
Not from the audience point of view, it wasn't sustainable because who in 1990 is going to relate to Spider-Man as a 1960s concept?
Right.
They're just not going to relate. So, they started doing things, and it doesn't even, having them be different dimensional versions is kind of the easy out. After a while, you just give up and just do them different this time. And if everybody squeals and says, wait, what about what happened 5 issues ago? And you're like, fuck you. And no, this is what I'm writing now. This is what I like. And I'm the writer now, not that other guy. You're reading my Spider-Man. Done.
Right.
I think, I can't say this actually did it, but there was a period when, sometime ago, when one of the writers on Daredevil said, you know what, we've been doing grimdark for 25 years now. I'm going to do lighthearted Daredevil. We're going to go kind of back to the late 60s when the stories weren't very serious and, there was a lot more lighthearted material in it. And And I'm just going to do it my way, too. Never mind what everyone has done in the past. I'm just going to do fun Daredevil. And yes, there was an outcry because everybody knows Daredevil is a grimdark character.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden, after a few issues, the writer was really good at it, and people were like, God, this is actually kind of refreshing. I'm kind of liking this. And never minds that continuity with a prior set of issues was just junked. Just forget it. This is my guy. So how does that relate to role-playing? Nobody has really done that. And it's funny because that's actually the default for superheroes. The attempts at continuity have actually been fairly desultory and variably successful. But the sort of the my prose poem, this creative team, this editorship, this is what we're putting out there for the character right now. Period. We care about our own continuity. That's it, if any. And we don't care about anything else. And people are okay with that. People are okay with that. I mean, how many versions of Robin/Nightwing have we seen across the multiple media of the character in the last 20 years alone? 7?
Yeah.
8?
Probably more than that with all the direct Netflix.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've got the cartoons. We've got, him as a character in Young Justice. We've got, all sorts of things. The different versions of the Titan, the different versions in Batman's. Notice I said Batman in the plural. That was on purpose. And so you've got all this. And frankly, everyone seems to like it. You're like, yeah, we've got kind of a Robin-y thing going on in our head, and we want to see what you do with it this time. It's haiku. There's always a moon. The question is, what's your haiku about the moon? But do we do that in role-playing? And the answer is no. There is a different aesthetic going on that has very little to do with mass audience consumption. And a great deal of what I was just talking about does seem related to mass audience consumption, particularly generational, and particularly, even with the same people, generational. A person who's watched the comics of Robin for, 40 years, when 40 years ago when they were reading the original Teen Titans, they would have been furious at anyone writing them differently. 40 years later, they're actually, kind of pleased to see all these different things happen. But in role-playing, I don't think we have that relationship between the material and the consumption of the material.
Right.
Maybe we can. Maybe the art form simply will turn into something. I hope it never turns into something which is utterly the handmaiden of some other medium. I do not want to live to see that day. Right. But if not, will it ever be the point where we sit down, make some superheroes, play them, and then in a little while go, new creative team. We don't have much of a model for that in role-playing, do we?
No.
So do you see, I don't know if I've been coherent in this talk, but I think I've tried to dissect some of the ways in which things have been long form.
Right.
And I've talked a little bit about what validates the effort as far as the actual role-playing is concerned, the actual imagined work and communication is concerned in the long run. And improvement is only an option within that. Expansion or escalation is only an option within that. It does seem to have a lot to do with consequence, that you have a chain of consequence from unit to unit to unit of attention so that you really feel as though things happened. And if it's been happening, then there's some weight to looking ahead and saying, this could keep happening. That's pretty cool when when you achieve that. Why not keep going? Um, are you familiar with the book version of Game of Thrones?
Yeah, I haven't actually read through all of it. I read through a big chunk of the first book, but I haven't. Yeah,
Okay. Just that first novel you've read, or some of it?
some of it. Yeah.
Okay. It's not very much. I've read the first three, which I am given to understand is now a very minimal exposure.
Right.
I have not watched the show at all.
Yeah, I stopped watching the show after that couple seasons.
The thing I have to say about the second and third book, which is why I stopped, and actually was kind of pleased by the first book at first, is that a great deal of what happens after that is characters running hither and yon with imperfect knowledge. Now, I am perfectly happy to read stories and even make stories in which characters have imperfect knowledge, because that is often a fuel for very fun things to happen.
Right.
But in this case, because characters have imperfect knowledge, they end up making decisions which are so suboptimal that all they do is churn things up so that now everyone else has to run hither and yon again. So the question is, which character is fleeing through the night with which character, and which character is imprisoned by which other character, and then which character is taking over power in defiance of some other character. And then you come back in about, half a novel later, and everybody's all just kind of switched places. Now he's running through the forest with the unlikely companion this time.
Right.
So what you have is a whole lot of, busy. And it's a very, very effective means of padding. You've seen it in TV shows 100 times. Just to rearrange and push. Everybody runs around with imperfect knowledge, and we use up another 50 minutes. Advertisers are happy. Keep going.
Right.
So, therefore, we can say that long-form participation and creation of and participation in a given set of content is not intrinsically called for. It's not automatically good to keep going. It's not automatic. I mean, it's not, when you consume it, it's not automatically good just because it's the next book.
Right.
The truly professional practitioner becomes very, very good at the tease so that the person is convinced that it is about to become good. So there they go.